So next up is a fireside chat on app monetization to be led by Christina Cragholm from Qualcomm.
Hello, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Christina Cragholm. I'm a Director of Business Development at Qualcomm. I'm based out of our San Francisco office, and I currently work on the Internet of Everything strategy and account management.
Great. And I am Troy Malone. I run Asia Pacific for Evernote Corporation. And we're getting some feedback.
So the focus of our conversation today will be twofold. Obviously, the title of the session is App Monetization, but I think we also want to talk a little bit about customer acquisition. So on that note, we'll actually start with customer acquisition. Troy, I'm curious, what did Evernote do on the customer acquisition front? Did you guys get it right the first time, or did you have to try multiple times?
I think we were relatively lucky, I would say, up front. We did get reasonable traction from the beginning. I think that we started at a time when the iPhone was just coming out. So we predated the iPhone by just a little bit. And then when the iPhone came out, we really jumped on that platform very quickly. And that was really, I think, a catalyst for us, because at the time, it's hard for us to think about this now, but there was a time when you used to go to the App Store and all you could find was that funny beer app, right, that made it look like you were drinking beer out of your iPhone, and maybe one or two others. So it was at a time where there really wasn't much clutter in the store, and therefore I think it was easier at that point to get the attention. So that was really what started us. So I think we started at a very good time. We've also pursued, though, other strategies that have evolved over time. One of those strategies has been really focusing on new platforms that we see that are emerging that we find very interesting. Examples of this are when the iPad first came out, a lot of the talk was, will this thing survive? Will this actually be something that's successful, that people will buy? Which is kind of funny now to think about that when you see all the adoption of tablets, both Android, iOS. But at that time, someone asked our CEO if we would be supporting Evernote for the iPad, and we're a relatively small company, so we kind of sat back and thought for a minute or so and said, absolutely yes, we will be on the iPad, and we will be on the iPad, day one. And we've taken that philosophy with every major platform that comes out being there on day one, and that's helped us from a customer acquisition standpoint because the owners of those platforms want to promote it, and they want to promote the apps that are available on their platform first. So we just launched, actually, I think it was yesterday, we did an announcement with Google Glass. So that's, again, just another example of our strategy. We're one of a very few number of apps that are available on Google Glass. So I think we're continuing to do that from a customer acquisition standpoint.
In general, did you take the same approach worldwide, or was it customized by region?
In general, it was pretty uniform worldwide, what we did. I think that strategy and philosophy served us well across the world. We're highly localized, though, as an application. So we're I think right now we're up to about 39 languages that Evernote is in. We have about 21 priority languages where we make sure that all of our apps are localized in those languages, as well as marketing, communications, etc. So it's a pretty big undertaking to do all of that, but it definitely works and pays off. But one of the philosophies that we have about international, and I think as a Silicon Valley company, we're pretty, as a Silicon Valley startup really, we're pretty early at going international. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary here pretty soon, and we've been international for a good 3 years. But part of that was the opportunity obviously is big, and we just saw organically our user base was growing outside of the US. Right now about 2/3 of our users are outside of the US, so we're by default a very international company. But we're very adamant about the fact that we really believe that if you're going to build something kind of middle of the road, mediocre, you really need to focus in on different locales and make it very local for different countries, different cultures, etc. But if you build something that's truly great, you don't need to do that. You know, just an example, I mean, think about, a good example is you look at, GM as a car company. It's kind of mediocre. And you buy different GMs in China than you buy here in the US, than you buy in India. It's very localized. But you look at BMW, it's exactly the opposite. BMW, it's the same everywhere. Same with the iPhone, right? There's no localization. So we want to be the level of company that we've built something that is fundamentally so good and excellent that really everybody wants it.
So on that note, what would your advice be to new application developers? How can they take what you've said and internalize it and then put it to use?
I think a few things. Really understanding what your goals are. There is a case to be made that in certain markets you don't have to focus as much on the product. If you're in a market that has very few competitors, you can kind of be a little bit sloppy on the product end and get away with it. But increasingly so, it's so competitive out there. I think that what we've done, we've never spent any money on customer acquisition. So we've never really done any advertising or marketing along those lines. The only thing that we have done from an investment standpoint is put all the money into our product. So that's really where we invest. And the way things have changed over the past 5 years, really with the onset of the iPhone, is there used to be, who can remember going to the store and like buying a CD in a box and getting like really excited about coming home and installing that? It's funny to even think that we did that, now, because it's a vastly different world. So all of the barriers that used to exist of logistics, it used to be if I wanted to sell my software in Bangladesh, I had to figure out logistically how to make that happen. You're dealing with resellers, you're dealing with printing and logistics and all that good stuff, placement in stores, etc. All that has gone away for a lot of software. And right now, for us, the app stores are king. And the good thing about the app stores is the customers, the users, are really choosing the winners. And we've benefited from that. And I think that your number one goal should be to build a software application or an application that is worthy of being talked about, right? That's a huge threshold. I'd say 90% of the software that I use in my daily life is good, but I'm not kind of nudging my friend and saying, hey, you gotta download this and use it, right? So if you can cross the threshold and invest in that, in getting to the point where people are nudging their friends and saying, man, you've got to use this application, it's amazing, then your marketing is done. You spend $0 on marketing and you spend all that money on continuing that product dev cycle that gets you to that level. And then really your users are your marketing force. So I guess my advice would be to try to build to that level. And have the marketing get taken care of through your users.
So in today's market, as you said, you're no longer worried about shelf placement per se, but in the app stores, sometimes discovery can be a challenge for new developers. So in that trajectory of moving from being just a download to a virtual preload or on the carrier shelf, all the way to being in a preload either by an OEM or as mandated by a carrier, do you think preloads really are the holy grail that they're made out to be?
I think that they used to be. I was just in Seoul the other day, and we got a hold of an S4, so Samsung's flagship phone, and we unboxed it, and our CEO was kind of going through it, and he actually counted all of the pre-installed software, And just looking at the apps, not the widgets, but the apps, there was 74 pre-installed pieces of software. And that's a very difficult environment to compete in. But one thing of note is that as we were configuring the phone, so you have all this clutter over here, right? You have all these apps that people just delete anyway, that used to be the great pre-install kind of promise. But as we configured the phone, we were made aware of the Dropbox deal that Dropbox has with Samsung. And it was highly prominent. It was really an amazing experience. And that is where you want to be. So I think if you're going after preloads, you need to really figure out a way to rise above the clutter. It's very difficult to do, but I think that preloads used to be great, and I think that increasingly so we're seeing much and much less effect from necessarily preloads, but it's preloads coupled with marketing with that preload that is key.
So to that end, do you have any recommendations for developers on how to better cooperate with either OEMs or carriers to kind of make that, truly outstanding user experience that jumps out?
Yeah, I think that, we're an interesting app. When you first download Evernote, it's totally useless. So if you're a game, when you're first downloaded, it's exciting, it's fun, it's useful, people love it, right? You kind of have value right at the beginning. Our value is derived over time. So one of the biggest challenges that we have is when the customer first interfaces with Evernote, making sure that they actually find a use case to make Evernote useful. And if we can get over that hurdle, then we have them for life. Then we have them. So what we try to do is get marketing tie-ins so that, let's say that there's a manufacturer, a device manufacturer that pre-installs Evernote, but also the box of the phone shows the Evernote application on the phone. And then when you open the box, you have a little leaflet in there that kind of says, hey, what is Evernote? How can you use it? That kind of tie-in is really important and very effective. But it's difficult. When I first started doing deals, I think we had 10 million users. And it was a much different experience doing deals then versus now. It was kind of the ever who, especially in APAC, it was like, ever who, what, you tell me about your business. Whereas now they're more seeking us out. So I think that evolves over time.
Great. Why don't we go ahead and shift to talking about app monetization? I guess maybe if we can do a very brief kind of set the landscape. What do you see as the main different forms of monetization?
The key point here is something that our CEO has talked a lot about, and I absolutely love his analysis of this. App monetization, a lot of people ask me, how should we monetize? Should we do ads? Should we charge for the app up front? Should we have a service that's subscription, do a freemium model, etc.? And one of the key pieces of analysis that I really like that Phil Libben has done at our company is really stepping back and looking at your app from a value perspective to the user. So when the user first downloads your app, be very honest about the value that's there. I've been very honest that there's pretty much no value there when you download Evernote. You've kind of been coerced by your friends to download Evernote, and they're kind of saying you need to download this. You download it, and you're kind of like, wow, this isn't really that valuable. So our value up front is very low, but Angry Birds or a game is extremely high as soon as you download it, and a bunch of other apps might fall in between. Might be focused, like a Pinterest would be focused more on eyeballs and keeping you coming back. So understanding where your value lies over time with the user is very important. So if you're a game, you want to extract revenue as quickly as possible. You want them to pay for it on download, maybe have a quick teaser app, but then have the main one something they pay for up front. We can be a little more long-term greedy, so we just want to get into their mindset, and then once they find that use case, we know that over time, it may take 3-5 years, but that's great, we're fine with that, but we know they'll pay, and our statistics show that over time, our conversion rate actually mirrors what we believe is the value to the user over time. So at month 1, we have about a 0.03% conversion rate of active users. At 1 year, it's about 8%. At 2 years, it goes up to about 18%. 3 years hits a little bit above 20%, and we have data out to 4 years that shows that if you're an active user of Evernote, at 4 years, 26% of people are paying. So we can kind of sit back and wait and don't have to really force the monetization issue. So I think it depends on value over time, being honest about that with your app, and then extrapolating a model from there.
And was that freemium choice, was that a conscious choice up front, or did that evolve?
Yeah, we were brilliant. No. It evolved. It evolved. We at one time thought about ads, but ads don't really fit our company ethos. These are your thoughts and memories. This is your second brain, right? So to be selling ads on top of your second brain just didn't seem to make sense, just with our kind of ethos as a company. So we quickly went away from that, and then the freemium model made sense once we kind of figured out that value chain and started seeing the data analytics of how people were using it, and they were growing with it and seeing value with it, and then we knew we had a model that worked. So then we went to that kind of freemium model.
And is that freemium model something that you're applying worldwide, or have you done any experimentation in the different regions? I know you're specifically responsible for APAC, so I'm curious if there's anything differentiated that you've done in certain regions around the world.
Right now we've done it all the same. So to buy it in India versus Korea versus here is the same. We've gone into local currency, obviously. We're going to start experimenting though with more kind of localized options for that.
And since the audience that we're targeting this conversation to is developers, what would you advise on the monetization front? I mean, you've laid out sort of a philosophy, but any additional advice that you would give?
Yeah, I think the product is key. And when I say product, you know, there used to be a day when we would say product is key and all the engineers would kind of put out their chests and get all proud about it. It's not just engineering. I think increasingly so, much more increasingly so, design is such a critical component of the product, because that's what produces really the end user experience, which drives your marketing channel, as I've described, user acquisition, etc. So I think focusing on the product in a holistic sense from both design as well as engineering is absolutely critical nowadays. It used to be that you could put out a product. In fact, when we first started, our product was very ugly. But I think that we filled a niche that people were very interested in, so we could kind of get away with being a little bit ugly. But we've shifted in focus now to be much more heavier on design and end user experience. And I think that is just a function of where the market is going. There's a lot of beautiful applications and intuitive applications out there. So when it comes to monetization, it all comes down to, is that customer deriving value from your app? And I think that a lot of that is that user experience. So I would focus on user experience, and then I think that your monetization will flow from that quite easily. But if you don't have the user experience, you're dead in the water as far as monetization.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Troy, for sharing your thoughts on Evernote and its app monetization and customer acquisition strategies.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.